Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Podcast.
What is good, everyone? Welcome back to the Exhaust Notes Formula One Podcast, your new favorite Formula One podcast, your favorite Formula One podcaster's favorite podcast. Honestly, I'm just happy that we're still on air. If you heard half of the things that were spoken before we hit record on this episode, we might be canceled. And honestly, that's kind of always the fun part about doing these shows is you never know how far we're going to go with these things. So hopefully this is just like your wildest ride in Formula One podcast, because I feel like we're continually upping our level, our game in that regard. My name is Nick. I'm with my guys, Todd and Rowett. What's good, fellas? How you doing?
I think if any of us would get canceled, it wouldn't be you two white devils. It would be me, as evident by what I said. And really, I was trying to get a Todd Yates spit take. I don't know. Maybe we'll work ourselves to it. But the way I would describe our pre-podcast meetings are the reverse of the Hangover movies, where you know how in every Hangover movie they stumble on the camera at the very end, and then the end credits are the debauchery photos? We're the opposite. The debauchery happens before, and then we tell Nick, let's record. And then we are very buttoned down. We are very corporate, because we're still trying to get sponsored, and we're still trying to go to races for free. How are you doing, Todd, in the grand scheme of things?
I was recording this secretly, the pre-roll, so I will release it if you Venmo me.
I would Venmo you to actually release it. And if you don't, then I won't pay you. So the joke's on you, Todd, because that was one of the funnier things I've said recently. And if only you knew, listener.
If only you knew.
I do appreciate that getting Todd to spit water or spit his drink out has become like a tradition with the show. Like, I know you can make me laugh pretty easily because you've got me in that regard, you know. But Todd's a little bit more of a challenge. He can keep it straight a little bit longer. Kids say,
you know? I'm going to waste this line when he's not drinking water. He's cut up from the butt up. Like, that is a man made up of muscle and discipline.
No,
cut up from the butt up.
I like that line though.
It's a great line.
Absolutely not true, as evidenced by my recent pickleball injuries.
Oh no,
we're good though.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, it's nothing major. Just being old and sore and fat doesn't.
I don't think any of those things.
I would love to play pickle against, because a lot of them play Padel.
Yeah,
I'd love to get a few of the F1 drivers and play some pickle and then dominate them.
Okay, so let's do this, because this is half the fun of having a Formula One podcast, is coming up with these topics mid-show and then seeing if we can weave them into the tapestry of the episode. Give me your top four, your top four Padel or pickleball players. And I guess first question I ask you, Todd, since you're a senior pickleball connoisseur of the podcast, is Padel really the Miller High Life of Padel classifications? Like, is it the champagne of beers? Is it the same sport? Is it two different sports? Like,
it's insane. It's insane. It's like tennis, racquetball, and pickleball all combined.
Okay. Now,
because you can hit it off the walls, and you can go outside the walls and still play it somehow. It's crazy.
Okay.
And then, because we are trying to be a far more efficient and faster podcast, like the sport we all love and follow, give me your two semifinals and your one final of the current drivers on the grid. And ultimately, the cherry on top is, who is the best Padel player to you, Todd, based on your extensive, expansive pickleballing career?
So it's not Max. He is not dominant the way that he is on the track. He is okay from all that I've seen, but he's very awkward when he swings the Padel or whatever the racket thing is called. I think probably, let's see, Albon I've heard is decent. Lando's decent. I'd probably have to give it to, I know you asked for like a semifinal and a final. I will skip that and just give you the finalists. I would say probably George versus Sainz.
Wow.
I think Sainz takes it though. Sainz is like, I think he's actually like a legit Padel player. I know Danny Rick plays a fair amount. He might be in the semis, but I think
so. I do have, you know, like mobile mics that we could set up. So if Formula One or Formula One adjacent companies are listening, we'd love to get Todd out there on the court with George and Carlos. We can mic them all up. It can be a live on-court podcast. From
not only that,
wherever we need to get to.
As Todd's unofficial agent, we will demand that if this event happens, Todd must exclusively wear a lime green or pickle green Lycra bodysuit.
That can be arranged.
I know it can be arranged. And
so
it's one of those things
quickly becoming like a Space Jam throwback photo op He'll be like a green screen
Oh,
character.
no, I think I like your Space Jam analogy, but I think if anything, he's the Bill Murray type. He's just this enigmatic stranger that's going to walk up middle of the game, drop some knowledge, and then be like,
interview them, just
interview them, and
school
then
them.
come up with some of the most brilliant tactical work that we've ever seen on the pickleball kitchen court. I don't know. I'm still a noob. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's court.
Carlos Sainz will just tell him, "That's great, Todd, but we're on defense." And then Todd's just going to slowly moonwalk out of the frame, just like Bill.
No.
Amazing. So Todd,
Yes.
let's go further down this rabbit hole. Pickleball. So I've played like not a lot of tennis, but a decent amount of tennis. I'm not very good at it. I played a ton of racquetball. I'm fairly decent at racquetball. I actually like playing racquetball as a form of exercise, but I've never played pickleball. Where do I start? Like outside of just seeing pickleball show up on like, so I have a Samsung Smart TV, and there's actually a pickleball channel on the Smart TV's channels now. So I don't want to admit that I've watched a few handful, maybe more, dozen matches plus, but what skills from tennis and racquetball am I bringing to pickleball, and where am I going to land, and how do I get started? Like where on the scale of 1 to 10, if you know that I've played other racket sports, do I land? Also, I suck at ping pong. I should add that.
Oh, okay. So I grew up playing a little tennis just because I had high school buddies that played for the team. And I played a lot of ping pong and got actually fairly competitive at that. Those skills did not transfer over for me at all in pickleball.
Perfect.
Other than swinging, like the natural motion of swinging a racket like tennis. Like if you have that, you're golden. You're going to be fine in pickleball. At the like beginner levels, you just jump. You got to learn the rules. It's a bunch of confusing, dumb rules, just like Formula One. Learn that stuff. Side out, first service, second service, where it goes, stay out of the kitchen, that kind of stuff. And
am I right, ladies?
Yeah. Woo! And then you're good. You just jump in, find a local park. Guarantee there's a club of some sort near you.
Yeah.
To Google's, and that's exactly how I got in it. Found a club.
All right.
Started going to beginner's night.
Ro, have you tried pickleball?
I refuse to do pickleball just because I've played tennis once in my life. I enjoyed it, but then the vitriol that I see at the local pickleball courts on the Nike campus, I was like, and here's the thing, dirty secret about working at Nike, we play a lot of intramural sports. There's always a lunchtime run of whatever your favorite sport is. And it's one thing to get into it with somebody over a manly sport. And I hate sounding sexist, quasi-sexist anyway, when I talk about this, but like I've been in football arguments, I've been in soccer arguments, I've been in basketball arguments. I'm not comfortable enough in my manliness to get into a pickleball argument. So that is the no.
It'll happen.
I know. And here's the other thing. If I do start a pickleball obsession, because I'm the type of person that whatever I do, it turns into an obsession for 6 months. And the real secret is, can I take past month 6? I'm going to inevitably start a pickleball themed podcast called What's the Dill? And I will ask both of you to be on it. So I'm not ready.
100% taking that idea. I'm going to start a pickleball, and that's the title.
I'm the gift that keeps on giving, listener.
Yep.
So there you go. If you want to hire me for your podcasting consulting services, you can find me on Twitter at Roheezy, and we'll get to the other stuff. But speaking of other stuff, gentlemen, did we have a race 2 weeks ago, or was that a fever dream?
It feels like a fever dream at this point.
It does feel like a fever dream, though.
And the reason I ask is because I think for the bulk of this episode, our topics are essentially twofold. One is going to be a, lack of a better term, state of the union on what the hell is Aston Martin doing. But I think first and more importantly, we've been hinting at this for what feels like the last 15 episodes that, hey, McLaren's getting more and more competent. And lo and behold, I think I'm ready to say we no longer just have a constructor's race. We might have an actual driver's race. And the thing that I guess I want to talk about first is, first of all, what do we make of that race? And I'm trying to remember, and I'll defer to senior race correspondent Akinsu Ochoa. Akinsu, please, your thoughts.
Iquinsu Ocha. You don't remember what that's from? Come on.
No, I don't.
You actually dropped White Devil in the pre-show, which I thought you were referring to my name, which is White Devil in Wachatu from Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura Pet
Here's
Detective.
the thing. This is what we're going
Ocha.
to. What we're going to do is the cover art is going to be a rhino's butt, and it's going to be my face coming out of it.
It used to be Lando coming out of it.
There you go.
Oh, God. You know what's funny? I kind of said this at the beginning of the weekend for Monza, but, it's kind of a boring race for me and always has been. I don't think I know it's like the temple of speed and there's so much history there and the banking and all that stuff. As far as the race goes, to me, it's pretty boring. There's very predictable places to pass. It's down the straight. It's, I guess.
Temples are inherently boring. Like, who's going to temple and be like, you know what, I'm ready for raucous time?
It is true. It is true.
So I don't know if it's just me, but I've always found Monza kind of boring. Like, I wouldn't be sad if it left. I know it's like, that's sacrilegious to say to several million Italian people, but it's just
probably tens of millions, if we're being honest. Several doesn't do justice.
33 million.
Yeah.
How many?
Not to mention
Tifosi?
the Tifosi. Yeah, exactly.
Like, sorry, Tifosi, the race isn't very good. So I mean, it was cool that Chuck won. I mean, Ferrari getting a win at its home race.
Yeah.
Super cool, but like, really, there wasn't a lot of, to me, like a lot of, there never really is. Other than, what was it, 22? Was it 22 when 21. Max and Lewis crashed. Max landed on top of Lewis, and then Danny Rick ended up winning that race. That was like the last time I can remember.
Was that
Monza
20?
being? Was it 21 or 22?
I think that's 21. I think that's 22. Sorry, because I think Sergio won 21 and 23, right?
Maybe.
Like, Sergio's like the only
at one point.
I think Sergio's the only one that's won twice, though, right? Out
I
of the
thought
current
that was
drivers.
Baku, because I swear I saw that
Was it?
infographic.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking about it wrong then.
Now,
No,
and
Checo does great in Baku.
And listener, if you contribute to our Patreon, you will give us the funds we need to hire a stat boy or a stat girl to look these up, so that way we don't look like complete clowns as we try to recount these things.
Okay, here we go. Daniel Ricciardo won in 2017, Lewis Hamilton in 2018, Valtteri Bottas in 2019, Sergio Perez in 21, Max Verstappen in 22, Sergio Perez in 23.
So we're hitting the portion of the calendar where Sergio Perez may be competent again, and that's okay. I'm all right with that.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as the race goes, the one thing that is evident, and we'll get into with the McLaren thing, is like, up until this point, they don't know how to handle having two number one drivers.
Yeah.
And it's been evident for several races now, and they're really shooting themselves in the foot.
Before we go down that path, Todd, let me ask you something. Okay. I'll ask both of you guys this, because I've said this before, and you kind of, like, given Leclerc, the nod for winning the home race for the team. My perfect season of F1 is every driver winning their home race, or every team winning their home race. Like, to me, that adds so much fuel to the fire of the sport as a whole. I can't imagine, I realize that as I say that, we also did just watch Lewis and Max battle in the most epic of all sports battles ever of all time in the history of the universe, probably. But what would be the perfect season for you guys as a fan of the sport in regards to, like, how it plays out? We're seeing kind of a really interesting mix this year that I think none of us really expected. We all kind of were like, Max is probably going to wipe the floor with everyone again. And now here we are, like, considering Max might not even be at the top of the list by the end of the season.
I keep saying that old narrative because I hope that every time I say it, I further veer things into chaos. Because ultimately, I think for me, I would love the closest equivalent we have to a Mario Kart type atmosphere. And I don't think that's going to happen. But what we have right now is very encouraging, because there's competition and there's a competitiveness that we haven't seen in nearly 3 years. And it almost felt like competitiveness was a ghost of the pandemic, or prior to the pandemic, because Max has been so dominant. Now, to the point where we're kind of dancing around the way McLaren's been dancing around it in the season, like, I applaud them on one hand for making the decision to tell Oscar that, hey, we are now going to be racing exclusively to ensure that we can get Lando his first championship. But you guys are far more established as Formula One fans and connoisseurs of the sport. Why wouldn't they have done this earlier? Was this something in terms of protecting the egos of somebody? Because the way I've been talking about this team is, this is papayable. Lando is their version of Max, and that second seat to me would always seem to be revolving. Now, what has happened is they've stumbled onto who I think could also be a possible future world champion as well. And I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too in terms of pacify both of them and then still kind of go competition. So I do kind of initially applaud what they've done. I just fear that it's a little too late in the season to do that.
So I honestly think they just didn't think they would have a car or a team that could compete for a drivers' championship. I think that this whole upward trajectory that started 6-8 races ago was unexpected. I think they all believed that they could get to that, but I don't think that they expected it to happen this season. That's my opinion on it. I don't know that I even have any more to contribute than that, because I feel like they've, like Todd said in the pre-show, they don't know how to handle two competitive cars.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of the same feeling. I think they believed in where they got their own car, but I don't think that they believed that everybody else wouldn't catch up, if that makes sense. Like, I thought they thought that Red Bull would incrementally keep getting better, and that they thought and Ferrari would have the odd good race, which they have. But now it seems like Ferrari's like consistently nipping away at their heels, and Mercedes seems to have figured out a lot of their issues. So I think that they thought they would be here, but it wouldn't be such a, at least up until this point, like they wouldn't have had that, quote unquote dominant car. It's not, I guess it's not dominant. And Carlos Sainz actually said that they have the best car, but it's not dominant like the Red Bull was last season or the first few races of this season. They're out front by a couple of tenths instead of half a second or a second. So I think they had the conversation from the beginning. It's like, no team orders, we're going to let you race. But they should have recognized sooner that because up until the first, I want to say 5 or 6 races, Oscar was kind of a fair chunk off the pace of Lando, and he wasn't getting the same results.
4 or 5 cars back typically, right? Like,
yeah, something like that.
Right.
Like if Lando was P2, Oscar was like 5-6. Yeah. So he's like, so he was and still is like, where are they in the standings right now?
I mean, so as a team, McLaren is only 8 points behind Red Bull. For the drivers, Lando is 62 points behind Max, and Oscar is 44 points behind Lando, and Charles Leclerc is kind of in the middle of the two of them.
So, like, they should have recognized at least 2-3 races ago, like, hey, we need to prioritize Lando here because he actually has the best shot of catching Max. I know, like, even last race in Monza, they got 2-3. So swap them around. That's 2 points. Like, you're both on the podium in the end of your career. That's not going to matter. Like, it's not like you look at how many second places you got versus how many thirds. It was just a podium, right? If it's not,
honestly, they should have given Lando the win. Like, they should have had that's a very tough call.
That's the one I wouldn't do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a disagreement. Gentlemen, defend your positions, much like Lando and Oscar could.
So my theory is that, look, I think it's the shittiest decision that race directors and team principals have to make. But I think that in order to win championships in a tightly competitive field, you have to decide that one driver is your go-to guy for the season, regardless of how they may be performing in the moment. I think you have to think of it as a holistic, if we win a driver and a constructor's title, we're all getting a shitload more money, and we have more money to play with next season, all of those things, right? So yes, it hurts Oscar in this scenario if they say Lando's going to take this win. But if both of those drivers benefit from it next season, and Oscar really has like a fresh start to like go at Lando, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think, honestly, like, from the way he's performed this year, like, there's no denying that he's going to give Lando a run for his money as soon as he has the chance. And if he has that chance at the beginning of the season, and like, now he's got confidence, right? Both these guys needed the wins to have that confidence. I understand that. But now that they both have confidence in the car and the team has confidence, whether they were ready for it or not, next season is going to be out of the gate. Both of those drivers are going to have super high expectations and honestly, like, the chance to like start to run away with the championship if they,
assuming the car is good.
Yeah.
And that's a big assumption. But I'm with you, Nick, in the sense that at the start of every season, no matter what Formula One publicists want you to think, every driver, or rather every team knows who their first driver is. And it's almost to the point where it doesn't need to be said out loud. And yes, kudos to Oscar for bridging the gap as quickly as he has in his second season, that they now have to formally do this in the midseason. But I also think, hey, McLaren, on sheer incumbency alone, Lando's your number one driver. Like, this shouldn't be said. And I understand that you want to keep the dogs hungry because hungry dogs run faster or drive faster in this case. I have the gift of hindsight, and I'm just kind of confused that it took them this long to admit their, not necessarily a mistake, but their current status. And that's what's frustrating to me, because I do think if they were a little more transparent with themselves, maybe Lando would have gotten a little bit better, a little bit faster in the race, instead of us relying on this 6-race span to kind of bolster the credentials of McLaren as a racing entity.
See, I'm going to push back again. And I don't think, and I think what they said, how they're going to approach it going forward with the team orders, quote unquote, is the right way to do it. If they're fighting for P1, they're going to let them fight, because that's the fair thing to do. And I think Lando's actually on board with this. He says he doesn't want to win the championship by but if they're fighting for a 2-3, then they'll swap positions to get those extra points, which is, I think, the right way to go about it, because of what I was saying. Like, at the end of the day, a podium, if it's not first place, then it's just a podium. You don't care about whether it's second or third, really. But they should have recognized it sooner. And, like, they've had situations where they could have not put Lando in that, like that one race where they had to, like, Lando, please, come on, let Oscar through. And it came down towards the end of the race. If they just given Lando pit strategy from the beginning, because he is the de facto number one, like you're talking about, Ro, just, like, do that without, like, deal with the aftermath of unhappy Oscar after the race saying, why'd you give Lando pit strategy? And just say, like, this is why, because the race was playing out this way, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Do those things, because right now what's killing them is their strategy, because they don't know how to handle or prioritize driver one versus driver two. And that's killing them in the pit. And that's costing them points in races overall.
And I think they're trying to make both drivers, they're trying to appease both drivers, right? And I think, yes, like, Lando had to give that place back for Oscar's win. And it's not a knock to Oscar, but I think that even in that race, like, had they done what you said, Todd, Lando had strategy, he wins that race. I think that he easily wins that race in almost every other outcome that plays out for that race. And that's why I think they should have just, I don't think it should come down to the end of a race, them telling drivers to back off or whatever. But, like, again, this is, like, something that they should have taken into consideration and been clear about from the get-go, because ultimately that's hurting, their chances or Lando's chance to win a title. And, like, we say it as a driver's championship, but, like, the team makes millions of dollars if their driver wins, right? The team makes millions of dollars if they win the constructors. But, like, Lando also is going to make a ton of money. I think it's just it's not even about the money necessarily, but it's just like, you have to decide that this person is going to be the one that wins if you want to win when you're trailing Max Verstappen by so much halfway through the season, right?
Quick push devil's advocate thing on this. You keep saying that they get more money to play with next year, develop the car, etc. If they win the constructors, they actually get less development time. So it could hurt. That's why it's more important for them to do a win now. Lando's our guy. Let's go after the drivers' championship, because the constructors, while it will give them, incrementally, $10-20 million more in their kitty to play with, they
Sorry, listener.
They will. I don't even remember what the fuck I was saying.
You were saying when development time gets shorter.
They lose development time compared. I think P1 in the constructors gets like 70% of the max or something like that, 75% of the max. So
it's almost
the other
like
teams catch up. Right?
The only thing that mirrors American sports in terms of the draft lottery is wind tunnel time. So the worse you do, in theory, next season you kind of recoup that in terms of you get the most wind tunnel time, because I guess they want you to do better, and the thought is, hey, if we give you more wind tunnel time, you're going to get better.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just wind tunnel time, it's like overall development time. It actually limits the
cat feline dinner.
No, it's computational fluid dynamics. They do like virtual wind tunnels, basically.
Okay. If I can bring up a point that was kind of a little bit further back before Todd's outburst, why would McLaren care about the world's most stoic man being upset, right? Like, we've joked about this a lot in the last couple of episodes, is the fact that he's downright Kawhi Leonard-esque in terms of the lack of expression or lack of any demonstrative actions. So why would we care? That coupled with the fact that he's still a second-year driver, which, yes, there are certain professional respects that have to be paid to every single member of the grid, unless your name is Latifi, Mazepin, Stroll Jr., possibly Stroll Sr. as well. But is it just something along the lines of, do you guys think they're giving him the benefit of the doubt because of the fact that he is still a young driver and they want him to stay engaged? Or why would they, I guess, continue to fluff the ego a little bit?
From what I've heard, God, what the hell's his name? Previous Australian driver.
Mark Webber.
Mark Webber is his manager and has been very involved in sticking his nose into things and the whole like team dynamic and whatnot. That's totally just speculation and rumor mill stuff, though. But to like keep him happy, they've kind of done the non-team orders thing, giving him a chance to fight. Webber famously had the multi-21 incident with Seb Vettel when they were doing team orders and Seb ignored it. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But I think like you kind of nailed it there, Ro. Like, he is a second-year driver, and he's a pretty level-headed dude. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. If Zach approached him and is like, hey, listen, and this is, 5-6 races ago, like, you're with the team and you're a super strong driver. This is where we stand now, and you're 60, 70, 80 points behind Lando, whatever he was at the time. We need to prioritize Lando in these types of situations. I think he'd be like, all right, I get it. Like, I don't think it would be too much of a pushback from him.
I think if you word it in the right way as well, like you say, like swap positions and think about the situation. Lando is, I don't want to say easily, but like the odds are probably 50-50 of him winning at this point. And if Oscar is the number one driver on the team and he's in that position, would he want Lando like to be given the green light and potentially ruin his shot at a championship? I just think like I know that team orders suck, but it's one of those situations where the odds of Oscar winning a title are slim to none, even as good as he's driven, even as good as the car's been. But with Lando, I feel like, and obviously I'm a little biased because I'm a Lando fan. I'm an Oscar fan too, but I think that anybody that can like reasonably like hear that message and think about the situation, if it was reversed where they were on the other side of it, you're probably going to say, yeah, I don't like, if I'm going to catch the guy that's 40 points in front of me, I don't want to have to worry about the guy that's 60 points behind me on my own fucking team. Like that's like kind of asinine when you think about it in that way. But I also understand, like, we've talked about it before, but like these guys, regardless of how nice they are and how, kind they are and level-headed they seem, they have to be the most egotistical people in the world to be the best at what they do in a sport that's so competitive.
Yep. I don't know what we'll see, but going back on something you just said, Nick, you really give McLaren or Lando 50-50 odds at winning the Drivers' Championship?
Yeah, 40 points. What do we have left? 8 races?
No, he's 60 points behind
I think
Max.
he's only 40, right?
No, 64 points. Hold on. Drivers' Championships. Yeah, he's at 303. Lando's at
points. Okay.
241.
And Oscar's 40 points behind Lando, so I mixed those up.
Okay,
so maybe like a 35% chance, but still the best chance McLaren has had in decades.
Yes, absolutely. Since Lewis, it's the best chance that McLaren's had since Lewis's championship. So I agree with you, but yeah, I think so much stuff has to go right for Lando to be even sniffing Max there. Trust me, I want it. Like I'm more of a fan of, and I think this has been established, but I'm more of a fan of the team McLaren than I am Lando or Oscar. Like, I like them both, obviously, but I've been a McLaren stan since the 90s, and I'm excited for the potential of either championship, but I just still really hold my breath because I don't feels too good to be true. Max is going to come some new rocket ship upgrade or something. And
But that furthers my point of, like, as shitty as it is, have the team orders. Now all of a sudden you probably increase the chances of Lando winning a title by 10 or 15% just by not having to have all this mental gymnastics that's happening around pit stops and around team orders throughout papaya rules, all this stuff. It's like, look, Oscar is I don't want to say definitely not, but like, I just don't think Oscar is winning a title this year. I think Lando has a chance. I think that if you're a team, you got to give it your all for the one guy that actually has a legitimate chance. And I think anything less than that is a mistake in the management of the team.
I mean, again, like for what I said, like things that have to go right for Lando to even have a small chance at winning a title, literally half the grid would have to fall off for Oscar to win a title. Like, think about it. Even if Max doesn't win, he still has Leclerc and Lando in front of him in the constructors.
Just for those of us that don't have the driver's chart in front of us, what is the point difference right now between Max and Oscar in fourth, I'm assuming, based on what you guys have been saying?
106 points.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you in 25.
I mean, really, like,
yeah.
Now that Ferrari seems to be quick again, that's even like more kind of chaos for the Lando Max situation. And Mercedes seems to have like kind of every other race good performance now with the car. So there's so much that like they're going to be, and all of those could be taking points away from Max or Lando in a good way or bad way. Like, it's going to be chaotic for the rest of the season.
How many races do we have left? We have Singapore.
Well,
so
Baku's
Azerbaijan
this weekend.
This weekend. Then Singapore, the U.S., Mexico, Brazil, Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. So we have 8 races left. So, I mean, honestly, like, it is not as far-fetched as I thought for Lando to win with 8 races, but it might even be statistically impossible for Oscar to win without God coming down and like literally knocking 19 cars off the grid to start each race or something. Like, there's just no way he's going to make up 100 points with, like, to Todd's point, Mercedes is doing well off and on. Ferrari seems to like figured a bunch of stuff out and seems to be pretty competitive lately. I just don't see him winning. He probably has to win 6 of the last 8 races in order to win a title. And that would also mean that Max and Lando would have to, and Charles Leclerc would all have to have a couple of either DNFs or like, barely in the points type of performances. But with Lando, let's say 3 or 4 wins and 2, 8th or lower runs for Max. And Charles and Oscar stay the same, running in 2nd, 3rd, 4th the whole time. Lando ends up winning the title with, it's like really just on Red Bull to make a couple of mistakes or Max to not have the car for a couple of races. And, or like we've said earlier, like Sergio Perez is like, this is his time to shine. Maybe he comes around and becomes the front car for Red Bull for a couple of races. And then that also plays into, Lando's advantage.
No shot.
Say Checo does well in Baku, and by all accounts so far this weekend in the first 2 practices, he's actually been having pretty strong practices, as well as the Red Bull car itself seems to be doing better this weekend. So it's anyone's guess on who's going to be the fastest this weekend. But dream scenario where Checo ends out in P1 and Max is
P7.
P7, they will tell Checo to run, like, put it in reverse, and run over everybody before they let him win that race. There's no chance.
It's going to become like Days of Thunder. Put him into the wall.
I feel like it's the Ricky Bobby sequel we never got, but we wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's.
I was going to say, speaking of Red Bull mistakes, should we talk about Adrian Newey leaving?
Ooh, yes. This
This is what I do. I'm the best in the biz.
Mm-hmm. So I will start it by a tweet that Iron Trev put in the Discord when all this got announced. And it was Lawrence Sheldon Strollovich. These are the bullet points. Saves a team from going bankrupt. Adds 200% of the workforce to said team. Hires Fernando Alonso. Builds a new factory and wind tunnel. Makes Honda come back to F1. Adds Aramco to the team. Makes Newey their shareholder. Refuses to elaborate. And I think that's a great way to kick it off because of, like, as you called it, Ro, like the State of the Union on Aston Martin. Like, they just by doing one move, regardless of all the other stuff I just mentioned, made themselves a theoretical contender in F1.
So to me, and this is something I shared with you both in that infamous pre-race, I was going to say, but pre-show podcast meeting. To me, it was always going to be a two-step equation. Good job, Aston Martin. You got the first step right. You got Newey. You got the big fish. Now, and as somebody who's famously done the hard thing easy and the easy thing hard for his entire 37 years of his life, you have to get rid of Lance. Otherwise, this is all for naught. This is all for naught if you do not get rid of Lance. Because I'm reminded of this old quote that, for all my soccer head fans that are listening, Real Madrid had an era in the early aughts called the Galacticos era, where they literally bought every big player underneath the sun. And at doing so, they had to get rid of one of the most important players in their team, a gentleman by the name of Claude Makélélé. And it was one of those things that when Makélélé left the team, Zinedine Zidane, everybody's favorite French headbutting phenom, said, "What good is painting a car gold yet again for the umpteenth time if you've taken the engine out?" And right now, by taking out Lance Stroll, you're keeping the engine in the car. By keeping him in the team, you're taking the engine out. That's all I'm going to say.
You're just going straight to the
that is
jugular on this. We didn't even get to talk about the team. That's not State of the Union. That's just
Here's the thing.
An autopsy report.
As the body's not even cold yet. Like,
nobody's dead yet. We're just going to go straight
it's
to
punching
the
me in the face. It's Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I'm not dead yet. Give it time. Like, me doing that verbal evisceration is essentially hitting the Aston Martin bum one more time in the head with a blunt object, hoping that would be the killing blow. Because what are we doing? Because here's the thing. If he keeps Lance in the team, we're going to have this discussion of Aston Martin being possibly the greatest what if in the modern era of Formula One racing. Because, once again, they've done the hard part. They have seemingly taken Phil Jackson away from the Bulls and allowed him to be the new head coach of the Lakers. Now, the question is, you've got the most problematic Kobe that we can think of. And that's saying something because the actual Kobe was pretty problematic in those early days. From a basketball perspective, please don't come at me. And if you do, RAHBEE702 at Instagram.
I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here to both of you. But to give a little context for people that are not familiar with Adrian Newey, this man has designed the stat that we reposted on Instagram at Exhaust Notes FM. The stat that we reposted is the most mind-blowing statistic I think I have ever seen in the history of sports. And that's including 100-point games from Wilt Chamberlain and all of the craziness, right? 19% of Formula One cars that have won championships have been designed by Adrian Newey. The history of Formula One, they're taking into account the entire history of the 70 whatever years of Formula One. This man is basically 19%. He is
a fifth of the existence of the sport.
Yeah. So I say that the man is obviously very talented and knows his shit, knows what he's doing. But if I'm Daddy Stroll and I'm like, even if I'm giving my son a little bit too much credit, if I put the best F1 car designer in the history of the sport on the team and bring in Honda, who's notoriously successful in the sport despite their lack of commitment, you pretty much have a recipe where the driver doesn't have to be the best driver on the grid, in my opinion. Like, this is really, whether it's driven by this or not, like, I don't actually know. I honestly think that Daddy Stroll just wants to build a winning Formula One team. Lance, may be a part of that in 2-3 years. He may not. You never know. But he's doing all the right things to build an incredibly successful long run in Formula One. And he might be able to do it with his son as a driver, even without his son being, let's say, a top 5 driver on the grid.
I want to give one simple defense to your point, Rohit. Last year, Max Verstappen by himself won the Constructors and the Drivers' Championship. Checo be damned. He could have been Lance Stroll for all we care. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you put Alonso, who is still very highly regarded as in driver skill.
Yep.
Right? He's still an animal when he gets the car. At what was the beginning of last year, where he had a couple of podiums when that car was unexpectedly good. You put that man in a competitive car, he's going to do some magic. If you put him in a dominant car like Red Bull had last year and the beginning of this year, why couldn't they win a Constructors just off of Alonso and let Lance Stroll randomly pick up points here and there, the odd podium when he has a good race? Maybe it rains and he turns into Samant Stroll and gets a podium out of it. You know what I'm saying?
I never thought I'd see the day.
I'm not defending Lance Stroll by any means.
You are.
I have very non-PC words to say about Lance Stroll.
I know you do. And that's for the pre-show meeting. Please don't get us fired. But it goes back to this dead horse of a Lakers analogy that I'm going to continue to beat. It's just Jerry Buss would not let his kid be Kobe Bryant. He would let his kid be Jim Buss. That's where Lance Stroll's future lies. Let him be the team principal. Let him be the figurehead. He's done enough from a Formula One perspective that he may have gained a shred of credibility to some people's eyes. Not only that, I mean, the other thing that the Newey signing eventually led us down the path of is the inevitable Verstappen rumors. And I have something I want to say about that as well. My thought on the Verstappen rumors, and apologies if I'm jumping topics from here to there everywhere, it's just I'm shocked that I've lost my defense partner in the White Devil, that is Akunsi Ochoa.
You say that just as well as you say Zhou Guan Yu. It took you a whole season to learn how to say Zhou Guan Yu, so I'm going to keep it up for the whole season.
You should.
Akunsi Ochoa.
But I go back to this, right? A lot of the conversations we've had around Red Bull, especially during this civil war that they have with Christian Horner's indiscretions and Josh Verstappen's insistence that his son should not be there, I don't think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong because we have a podcast and that's the sort of thing that drives this content forward. Why would Max Verstappen go to Aston Martin if there's been a question always around, is it Max Verstappen's dominance? Is it Adrian Newey's car? Because to Nick's point, if he's designed a fifth of the entire sport's existence champions, that kind of populates the narrative that Max isn't that dominant, and it's really Newey's dominance that's propelled Red Bull forward.
It's a perfect storm of both, though, right? I think that's why it doesn't really matter. Like, if I'm Max or Adrian Newey, or Lewis, or Alonso, or anybody capable of winning a championship in a, let's say, top 3 car, it doesn't really matter who gets the credit for it, because doing it and dominating after the fact, 50 years from now, you're going to look back and you're not going to think about Max winning championships with Red Bull or Aston Martin. You're just going to look back and say, Max had 10 titles in his career. Clearly, he's one of the best to ever do it. Like, that to me is the only thing that matters, which I think makes it a pretty realistic possibility. And I think, look around this season. Lewis going to Ferrari, we would have never thought that. And if Ferrari is actually moving up and improving the way they have this second half of the season, maybe there's a chance that Lewis actually does. I kind of jokingly almost made that my hot take, months back, but it seems more a possibility every day we get closer to next season than it ever has been. And I think that's enough for someone like Max, who really needs to win to thrive in the sport, not just like thrive in the sense that he's winning, but like him as an individual is he's one of those people that is just needs to be dominating the sport in order to feel good about himself, I think. And you see it in his, his competitiveness in the sim racing, right? Like if he's not winning, he's the epitome of Ricky Bobby, right? If you're not first, you're last. Like I feel like Max takes that to heart more than anybody on the grid right now.
So Fernando Alonso would like a word.
Well, and that's what's going to be interesting, right? Like, I think on a personal level, the most interesting thing about Adrian Newey going to Aston Martin is what he may or may not do with the road cars for Aston Martin, because usually he's doing some crazy shit off the track that people are fascinated by. And having access to a car brand with a history like Aston Martin, who's done so many incredible things, is going to be really interesting. But with Alonso, I don't see Alonso, if the car is strong, Alonso already has a relationship with Honda. He already has proven himself to be, relatively loyal with Aston in a way that we haven't seen him be for quite a while. So if they provide a winning car and all of a sudden you have Max in one car and Alonso in the other, like, it's going to be fucking nuts. Like, these guys are just going to be out there.
Sign me up for it.
I know, and I'm all for it. Like, this is like, I mean, I don't really usually get excited about those kind of potentials that far out, but like those two in the same car would be, I mean, we've kind of talked about this before, right? If you have two drivers that are that competitive in the same, quality of a car, and if that car is built by Adrian Newey, like, we just don't get that as fans. So, that's going to be an insane, the whole thing could just become epic. I don't even know how to say it other than that.
I want to revisit something you just said, though. Fernando Alonso's relationship with Honda, just harken back to 2015 McLaren with the GP2 engine. I don't think he's probably on the best terms with Honda. Or I'm sure they smoothed it over now, but
Honda had to buy a shit ton of kimono hats.
Honda probably has...
No, Nick, this is my new gimmick. I'm just going to mispronounce things.
Yep, kimono. So that, but also, like you said earlier, Ro, is it really truly Max, or is it the Adrian Newey car? Or, like, it really is truly Max there. Like, that I will not, like, I'm not a huge fan of Max, but I respect the hell out of his talent. And the reason I can say that is, if it wasn't truly Max, then Checo would be right there with Max the whole way. And he's not even close.
But is that more Checo mental health? I don't want to make light of it.
No. Like, but I'm saying, like, mental health is a part of the performance of their athletic ability in a car, right? It's more mental than a lot of any other sports, right? Because I know it's physical and very challenging, but the reaction time and their, lizard brain racing stuff, like, echoes.
When are we going to get the Formula One race in and around the Denver airport? But I digress. Correct me if I'm wrong. The previous 3 years that Max won, was Checo number 2 in the constructors or in the drivers as well?
No, not last year, right? It was.
Was it
way closer though, right? I mean, I think Rowan has a point. Like, Checo has definitely mentally fallen off a little bit. I don't think that. It's kind of like what we were talking about with Lando and Oscar, right? And I think Charles Leclerc too, right? They all had these moments this year where it was like, oh shit, I can win. And now all of a sudden it's like, no, I go out and I know I can win. And Leclerc had kind of fallen off and had some strategy problems and some Ferrari problems. But then next thing you know, like, he's winning multiple races again. And I think with Max, maybe this is the question that I should ask. If Max is in a Red Bull or a McLaren this year, he still is probably winning a title or very close to it. If he's in any other car on the grid, I don't think that he's winning. So I still kind of give part of that credit to Adrian Newey to get that car to where it was. But I also think from a mental, lizard brain, whatever you want to call it, he's also kind of been like in all these negotiations with all these different teams for the past 6 months anyway. So how much is he really like influencing what the team does at this point on a level that he probably did the last 5 years there or whatever?
He's the reigning world drivers champion. Like, he's gonna.
No, I'm saying Adrian Newey.
like, so that thing I think is overblown a little bit because he was working like part-time for Red Bull essentially and just getting design influence, not necessarily designing the car from an aero perspective or from a chassis perspective.
Like in just this year or in previous years as well?
The last couple years, last 2-3 years, like I think he had heavy influence in the regulation change year. And since then it's just been more of like design influence on stuff that he sees, because they always joke that he sees in fluid dynamics. His vision is Predator, basically.
So he's essentially executive producing as opposed to actually directing and producing the car, is what you kind of...
Yeah. And the question, I guess, for Aston Martin is, because his actual role for Aston Martin is like the chief technical officer, like he's going to be designing the car, and how much influence, like the question for Aston Martin, even when they had a good car, say the beginning of last year, they squandered that lead that they had at the beginning as far as like, lap time pace.
Is it a lead if you were only going to top out at second place?
No, but I mean, they went from being in second to like
mid-table.
Yeah, at best they were mid-table, right? So Adrian Newey by himself can't build a championship-winning car. He has a lot of talented people at Red Bull and has for a long time.
But
so I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, because if we look at this from another sports perspective, if you're playing for the Bulls or for the Lakers and you have Kobe or Michael Jordan or LeBron James on your team, you're absolutely doing what they suggest, regardless of the title that they have, right? Like if LeBron is sitting next to you on the bench as like, I don't know, some like random secondary assistant coach.
Oh, even a random scrub player, right? We've all seen that meme of LeBron looking mad at random bench player, and then it's like, I'm gonna trade you tomorrow morning. He is the de facto coach. He's the de facto GM.
And I think Newey kind of can be that way at Red Bull without having the chief technical director title, right? All those guys at Red Bull would look to Newey as like a god in that world. And I think, I don't think he has to be literally, like adjusting wings and in the wind tunnel with everything for him to have some serious influence on the success of that car. Not trying to take anything away from Max. Obviously, I think it's very much like the perfect storm of the two of the greatest of all time in both respects. But I think it's going to be really interesting with him at Aston, because to your point, Todd, they squandered the hot start last season, but it's like kind of a fluke in a sense that they didn't really have any expectation for any of that. I don't think any of us expected much more than, like Alonso's going to Alonso. He's going to show up somewhere in the middle of a podium somehow, some way in any car. But other than that, like that's kind of feels like just what happened back then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it's yet to be seen, but I don't think it'll be like an immediate turnaround. It took Newey, let's see, Seb
4 years,
in
5 years.
No, it took Seb won in 13, and then Lewis started in 14, and Mercedes won up until 2021, right? So it took 8-9 years for Newey to catch up to Mercedes and surpass. And I'm not going to say Newey. It took Red Bull that long.
A little bit different when you're the one that built it, though, right? Like this is kind of, I run into this in like consulting stuff, right? With for years, I would end up getting jobs like building out site content and doing SEO for our favorite retailers. But like literally every time I'm doing it, I'm competing against the last people that hired me for a few years. So it's like I worked for Finish Line for years. I end up having them rank the top for, Jordans and Nike Air Max and all that stuff. And then Foot Locker is like, hey, we want you to do this for, East Bay was first, and then Finish Line, and then Foot Locker, and then other brands where like I'm literally the guy that's go-to in that world for a decade. So I know the strategy that exists at each of those places. It allows you a little bit more of an advantage versus his situation at Red Bull versus Mercedes, right? Because he wasn't at Mercedes.
No, I'm not saying Mercedes. He wasn't. He's been at Red Bull since 2008 or 7, whatever. whenever
I'm saying,
Red
like,
Bull,
now he's gonna
yeah.
have the insight of being at Red Bull, undeniably the top team for the past 4 years, 3 years, whatever, 3-4 years. So now it's like, okay, well, I'm at a higher starting point than I ever have been in terms of who I got to go after. Not to say that it's that easy to go after the top teams. I do think it's going to take time, but I think it will be shorter than the last time around for him.
Yeah. Speaking of last time around, if I can ask you gentlemen for a quick thought exercise before we end the episode. Let's say you can't get Max Verstappen. You are Lawrence Stroll. You've got the blankest checkbooks of all blank checkbooks. Who is the driver that you are going to hypothetically replace Lance Stroll with? Or conversely, are you going to keep Lance and replace Fernando? Basically, who would the new blood be in? I keep wanting to say Red Bull, even though it's not. It's Aston Martin. Who would the new driver be in a hypothetical Aston Martin team if they got rid of Lance Stroll?
Go ahead, Todd.
Who would actually play ball with Daddy Stroll?
I can think of one person.
Let's hear it.
And we mentioned him a lot, and we've talked about him as a sleeping giant. We've talked about him, despite being a stoic second-year driver and the team on the ascendancy. You can basically bat your eyelids at him and say, you want to be a future world champion? Study at the lap of Fernando Alonso for 1-2 years, and then the floor is yours. Because I think, A, you don't have to commit as much to him financially as you would a far more proven commodity. And I think he's got the perfect amount on paper to say, you know what, I can be just as good as Lando if I get the same sort of devotion and resources from a team. And you get arguably the greatest sensei of all in Fernando Alonso to learn from. And I would say this, Oscar Piastri's got a pretty good finishing school if that's how he ends up as a world champion, because he got to compete against Lando in McLaren, realized he wasn't good enough, and that usually tends to be the spark of a supervillain's origin story or a superhero, depending on who you want to ask. So I would say you go after Oscar.
I think that's interesting. I think that's feasible.
Thank you for being nice, Nick. Thank you for being nice.
I think we probably have at least a couple years before we see any changes to the drivers. Fernando is he has too much history. He's still, like we've said, top 5, top 6 drivers, even at his age. I don't think that he goes anywhere. Like, he'd rather stick around to see what comes from all this, in my opinion. And they're
so let's
setting
say he's
him up to be
whoever you pick. You're essentially replacing Lance Stroll.
Yeah, so I think Stroll gets replaced. This is a Band-Aid that is like super high resistant to being pulled off, but I think 2 or 3 years from now, honestly, like it's probably going to be a much younger driver than even Oscar. But I also think that, like, you might see him go for someone that has a little bit more, the reason why Oscar to me is not the prize pick for that seat is that you want to be able to market it, right? Like, I don't know, like, first name that comes to mind is Mick Schumacher, even though he's not anywhere near as competitive as Oscar. There's still so much clout that comes with his name. He's going to bring advertisers, he's going to bring sponsors, he's going to bring so much attention to the team that, I think, like, you get a little bit more personality for, to your point, even
you
less
get the
money.
race skill. It's like, it's a sliding scale.
Not special. Ask James Vowles. He's not special.
That's a constant frustration with James, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't really know the that's not probably not my first pick necessarily, but it's the first name that pops into my head, because it's like, you need people to, like, get people amped about the team. And as much as I like Oscar, I don't think he's that guy.
I think I know where Todd's going to go, but Todd, prove me right or wrong. Who do you got?
So the Oscar thing, I don't know why Oscar would leave. I feel like he feels like the next one at McLaren. I think, if anything...
But you think Lando's more likely to leave that team? Because I could see Lando do the thing that we spent last episode talking Max would not do, which is stay there as long as the drive is competitive, because he is king there. Like, why would he want to go elsewhere is the only reason why I think Lando's there for the long run.
Because I think he's already done the, like, loyalty thing. If his contract, by the time his contract comes up again, I think in 2028, if McLaren's still not right at the tip of competitiveness, then I could see Lando leaving before Oscar. Oscar's still got that new boy attitude. Weirdly, my first thought went to George Russell. And then I was like, wait, no, he would be like, Pa Toto, I can't leave. I can't leave Papa. Like he's too glued to the Toto Wolff empire. So secondarily, actually think Alex Albon.
Yeah,
The contract timing makes sense where he's got another couple years at Williams before he's up due again. Get a couple years of Newey influence on the car. They need to replace Lance. God, give him a couple of years of tutelage of Fernando Alonso approaching 50. Learn how to be a little bit more cutthroat. You know, like literally, talent-wise, I think Albano is up there, but he lacks.
I love me some Albon.
Killer instinct a little bit, right? We saw that in the Chamber of Fear at Red Bull. But if he gets a little school of hard knocks from Fernando Alonso, he's still pretty young. He's what, 25, 26?
He gets that dog in him, or that bull. It's funny you mentioned that because as you were going on your Albon monologue, which I strangely agree with a lot now that I think about it, the other one I would think would be very interesting to test in terms of their resolve is Albon's future teammate, because I think Sainz would have been another good one. But he signed with Williams, and I think that would have been one where we are all led to believe that the Williams contract is not very long for this world. I think we're all working with the assumption it's going to be 1 year and then he's going to go to Audi. But why not test Audi's resolve? And more importantly, Carlos Sainz's resolve, because then you've also got his literal racing idol outside of his dad being the coach. So the one thing I would say is it seems like in every one of our scenarios, we're using the dangling carrot of Fernando Alonso's tutelage as the number one catalyst for somebody to move there.
Yeah, and to be honest, you know, like I think there's a possibility that both drivers are gone within 3 years. You know, like I think Alonso is great. I have higher, you know, regard for Stroll than Todd does, but I think once you've invested that kind of money into a team, into a team,
I'm expecting Todd to be on the Stroll Christmas card this year because of how much he's defended Lance.
No, you know what's funny? Go ahead.
I'll go back to it again. I know I already said it, but like, give Alonso Max's car from last year and Stroll that car. Stroll's in the conversation for top 6 driver kind of by default. He's going to run into some people because that's what he does. But, like, besides that, he's going to finish in the top 5 of the driver championship, and now he's, like, a legitimate driver. He's not, like, Latifi or Logan Sargent bad, but he's not good. So, like, I don't know,
You're saying for the first time in his life, he could be described as middle class.
Yep.
You know what my favorite part thinking about this whole conversation? We talk about Alonso being like the leader and like the guy that, you know, is getting these other young guys going. And I can't not think of your reference to the guys that are selling the random stuff off the carts at the mall and just how much hustlers they have to be to pay those unspoken debts that have been acquired. And like, it's such a valuable skill, you know, like everyone should have to work in a food service job or in a mall stand kiosk, you know?
I was just going to say this. As I was padding the stats watching that video over and over again, I'm going to update that analogy. If either one of you guys were Succession heads like I was, Fernando Alonso's Tom. He's just looking for his Greg.
Yes.
I haven't seen the show, but now I want to, God. Just so I can.
He just needs a couple of Gregs to complete his Tomlet. So Let's just end it on that.
Yeah. Todd, you gotta watch it. It's so good.
I definitely need to watch that show. I have one final thing that I want to talk about, and that is we're going to be missing a driver this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Magnussen is suspended because of penalty points. And the absolute best part of that is we know that K-Mag is not shy about getting his elbows out. He is not going to be racing this weekend, which means he comes back in Singapore with 0 penalty points and 7 races left in his F1 career because he does not have a seat for next year, and that's probably for K-Mag.
Do the right thing. Hire K-Mag as the second driver.
Oh my God, it's going to be carnage.
I just hope that Lando is taking K-Mag out to dinner every night for the rest of the season. That way, when K-Mag does put those elbows out, it's towards, you know, Max.
Let him be his enforcer.
Yeah,
I was going to say, if I was Ferrari, I would want him to stay on the grid because, like every great hockey player or every great basketball player, You need an enforcer. You need your Charles Oakley. And let Kevin Magnussen become the automobile equivalent of that.
So
I don't care what kind of
who's in
branch
that
they're
seat?
Ollie Behrman.
Oh,
The
that's
Bear
right.
Man?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cousin.
All right.
it's going to be racing. Anyway, I thought that was a fantastic stat. I would love to see him come out and just dick swinging, just run people off the road.
Imagine if all justice systems operated that way. You hit your maximum limit, you're banned from the sport for a week, and then you start all over and you can just cause chaos. Just does not make sense.
Well, that's our podcast in a nutshell. It doesn't make sense, but we get there.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, who you guys got in Baku this weekend?
I'm going to go Max, Lando, Charles. Very safe, very vanilla, but it's who I am as a
I'm going to mix
podcaster.
those up. I'm going to go Lando, Charles, Max.
I'm going to go Leclerc, Max, Checo, which will be detrimental to Lando's.
So
I
the
think-
Checo comeback is real.
Well, no, I don't think it's a comeback necessarily. He just, for some reason, does well on street tracks, and Baku is the easiest of not easiest, but you know what I mean.
Easy
It's
street.
like, yeah, it's very, it suits his driving style. Whatever, he does well on Baku, so I think he's up there. He's fighting for it, and it sounds like the Red Bull. It sounds like the top 4 cars, Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, are all pretty close. So it could be any mix of those, but let's go Chuck again.
All right, there it is. Listeners, let us know what you think, whether you get your votes in beforehand on Saturday before the race, or let us know what you think of the race afterwards. And hopefully we'll catch you in the Discord. It'll be linked in the description. You can find us at Exhaust Notes FM, exhaustnotes.fm, at Exhaust Notes FM on all those social platforms. And more importantly, you can find these guys in their...
You can find me on OnlyFans at the Missouri Mud Flap. No,
Jesus.
Todd?
I don't know how that one is Indian themed, but
I'm also from Missouri. I grew up in Missouri.
okay. See, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, outside of
They had all been
Sacagawea.
previously Indian themed, so
Yeah. Listen, I'm the second most famous Indian to complete the Oregon Trail. It's me and Sacagawea.
you just say
Oh, my-
Chicago way.
It's not Sacagawea. I'm not anti-Semitic.
Jesus Christ.
We're so canceled. I might have to
Okay.
plan this
That's
one
her
before
official
we get...
pronunciation. Sacagawea.
I don't believe you.
Google it.
All
Listeners,
right, all
Google
right.
it and let me know. Shout out to Dan Herman, U.S. history teacher extraordinaire, who told us the actual pronunciation. Sacagawea.
Sacagawea.
I mean, that does sound pretty white devilish, so...
Yeah, find me on Instagram at White Devil.
Nope, not during election season.
Wait, yeah, don't do that. Find me on Instagram at Orange Man Bad. No, at
Orange Man Bad.
dadshoe.jpg, dadshoe_jpg, all the things.
I thought you were going to go Orange Man bad, Papaya Man good.
I mean, at least you didn't go with at eating dogs and cats or whatever the bullshit is this week, but yeah.
Jesus
Oh, my-
Christ, yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we got to get out of here. You can find me at Nick Engvall. We'll catch you all in the next episode. Thanks for listening, watching. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Yeah.